This video is sponsored by Atlas. What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and today we're talking about Shin Megami Tensei V, Vengeance. Some of you may remember that almost 3 years ago, the original version of SMT5 came out, and I absolutely loved it. This is an RPG for true hardcore fans of role-playing games, and now Vengeance is even bigger and far deeper than that first version was. Kinda think about this the way that we got like Persona 5 and then Persona 5 Royale. For our tale, we're playing as a student that's living a normal life in Tokyo. They're going to class, they're running down hallways, they're making friends, when suddenly, one day, they get transported to a dark, alternate version of Japan. Here, angels and demons are locked in a constant battle, and now you get pulled, unfortunately, into the fray. But there is a nice side to this. You end up getting some magical abilities after merging with a mysterious godlike being, and now we have a chance to roam this destroyed wasteland, the ruins of society, to see if we can save the world or at least get back. Now, here is where things start to get very different in Vengeance compared to the original base game. When you begin playing, you're given a simple question. Do you want to go on the path of vengeance or take the path of creation? This is essentially asking if you want to play the base game or the added new content. So since I've beaten the original, I wanted to try out Vengeance, so I picked that path. And this adds in more than just like new zones and dungeons and stuff. It adds in a cool character, somebody that is focused purely on the act of murdering as many demons as possible. She's ruthless, she's strong, and she's with you for huge chunks of the game, which means that if you choose this path, this new version of the game has thousands of lines of added dialogue, new interactions, and a lot of added elements that really changed the tone of some major plot points that I completely enjoyed. Now, if you take this path of vengeance, there's also extra stuff at the end of the game, or I guess I should say about halfway through it, you start to have access to a fresh zone and a fresh dungeon that you can explore. And let me be clear, areas are huge in Shin Megami Tensei. Like, just this opening area of it, this first desert part, took me nearly 15 hours to complete. So having this extra stuff in it, like just beating the game, takes you about 80 hours. And now with this Vengeance stuff, this is roughly 100 hours of stuff to do for a normal playthrough. And that doesn't even count the fact that you can beat the original Creation storyline as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about how this works. And when you have that controller in your hand, what makes this special? Honestly, this functions in such a savage fashion that's incredibly fun. While exploring these wastelands, you're going to be battling against different creatures that are based on like messed up monsters of ancient legend, or sometimes just something simple like a teddy bear full of human skulls. For this release, there are now 270 demons to fight and capture. 40 of these have been completely newly added to Vengeance. Now, when you're facing these baddies, you can kill them or talk to them. By chatting up a demon, it essentially gives you like a little tiny quiz asking you for potions or money, or sometimes just a silly trivia question that's like, hey, are you scared of me? Do you want to come closer? And if you answer correctly, it will join your party permanently. Now, the way this works is that Shin Megami Tensei is the kind of game that wants you to keep building up your party by leveling up, learning new magic, and merging your demons. You can take the monsters you've captured and push them together to create completely new demons and merge their powers and give them extra cool skills. So there's this constant sense of progression as your party perpetually is swapping out. But here's the other part of it. You can now have humans join you in battles. It's called the guest system, but sometimes you meet people and they'll actually run around with you, and their human magic is just as strong as monsters, and you can even take the essence of monsters and apply it to people. So you can take like a fire element out of one of your beasties and give it to a human, and they'll pretty much act like a fire demon. All of this is incredibly cool, but what's extra neat is that I have to appreciate the fact that when you're playing Vengeance, just running around, this game is so incredibly beautiful. Like, not just the way cool bosses and stuff like that, or like all the particle effects of like a cool magic spell, but just the little details. How the sand moves under your feet, a small twisty animation like when you're grinding on a rail to try and go to a secret spot. You can see the coils of darkness forming in front of you, or sometimes just the look of that next checkpoint shimmering off in the distance. It looks so good, and especially in this version, I'm playing it on PlayStation 5. This game just straight up, there were times where I wish this had a photo mode just so I could actually zoom in on a lot of these little details that are extra freaking cool. But let me keep going into this. So in Shin Megami Tensei V, you keep going back and forth from this corrupted land, the apocalypse, back to Earth. I'm not going to fully explain all the story beats of it because I think it is a fun tale to tell, but while you're switching back and forth, you get a chance to return to class and live a relatively normal life before the people realize that the whole world is already kind of screwed. But what's cool is that all these interactions are now even cooler and better with these additional added characters that have been invented. I think it's interesting that they managed to rewrite and add to pretty much every single scene, and so much of this dialogue feels a lot more weighty and impactful. But let me talk about the part of this that definitely I personally enjoyed the most, which is that they made it easier. But let me explain why. So in the original version, you could only save at checkpoints, these big founts of like blue energy, but in this version, you can now save anywhere, and grinding is way simpler. So when you're fighting people, they now have an auto battle system where after you've killed enemies, everybody has an elemental weakness. You know, throwing a bunch of electricity on a water thing will probably fry it. Or if you use ice magic on a fire beastie, it's going to do some intense critical damage. And once you know an enemy's weakness, you can always read it. Just literally clicking on the enemy, you will immediately see what they're strong against or absorbing and stuff like that. So with auto battle, after you've killed a bunch of monsters, you can just tell it to automatically attack or automatically use previously used weakness skills. And to me, I thought this was such a good choice because this is the kind of game where sometimes you got to run in circles and power up a bit. Like before you fight some of the incredibly tough bosses, not only do you need to actually collect the money, the resources, the potions, and the magic to fight back, but sometimes just the raw experience points to survive that next ultimate attack. And I will say that I used auto battling a lot. It's really cool that I have the option to grind quicker. So to me, this was a huge, great upgrade. Really, pretty much everything about Shin Megami Tensei V feels like a complete redo of the original game that I loved so much. Like, this is one of those games that I put 80 hours into on the Nintendo Switch 2.5 years ago, and now I know I'm going to put at least another 80 hours into this version if I don't do 2 separate playthroughs. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts because I am super happy with Shin Megami Tensei V, so when the developers actually reached out and said, hey, do you want to do a sponsored video checking out Vengeance, I, of course, jumped at it. If you're interested in the game, there is a link to it at the top of the description box, and be sure to check it out using that. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to keep dreaming. Man, I cannot believe how freaking great this game looks on PS5. Like, I think it's like 4K 60 FPS, and a lot of these areas, please Atlas, put a photo mode in this. I want to make some like cool backgrounds of that endless desert. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.